Hi, everyone. So my name is Gary Levinson. I am the Artistic Director of the Chamber Music Society of Fort Worth. And I have to tell you, I'm delighted to welcome you to this very special event. Essentially, what we're doing here is we're going to have a glimpse into a quartet rehearsal. And they're going to talk to you about what it's like to do this on the inside. You're going to get a lot of secrets from them. And here is a Prometheus string quartet. We got to know them over the last couple of days. And they're very special people, not only because they're committed to quartet playing, but also they're about to embark on the journey of an international quartet competition. It's called the Fish Off. And they'll tell you, I'm sure, in the middle of this, what it feels like to rehearse for a competition, which is somewhat different than if you're rehearsing for a concert or a tour. And really, this is a great opportunity for all of us here, both the students and the parents, to understand what is underneath the actual performance, which you'll see a great deal of detail and a lot of commitment, and I'm just really excited to have them here. So please give them a big hand. So the way this is going to go, they have a mic over here, and but you guys, if you wish, you can start playing, or you can talk a little bit to the audience, whatever works for you. So I'll just turn it over to you.
How about you explain just a little bit about what you're doing? Yeah, you can go.
Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here. So we're the Prometheus String Quartet. We formed at Juilliard about a year and a half, 2 years ago, in our second semester of our master's. Like Gary said, we're going to be heading off to the Fish Off competition next weekend we're going to be there. So it's a lot of flights right now. We have two pieces we're going to play for you today and sort of dive into. The first one is Haydn's Opus 20, number 5. It's a string quartet in F minor. It's from his Opus 20 set, so this is his first sort of mature set of string quartets, and where he really starts to experiment with especially the bass, the cello in the quartet. The bass line gets a lot more active and has a much more active role. And yeah, we're gonna also play the Debussy string quartet for you, the first movement. And I think something that's gonna be interesting to talk about is the different sort of styles, how we use our different techniques. So with our bows, the different styles of using the bow is much different with how we approach Haydn versus Debussy. There's a lot more colors that Debussy offers with the impressionistic style. And well, that's enough talking, I think. I think we're gonna play some Haydn for you, and then we'll sort of dive into some of the details. Should we go until...
Let's go until exposition.
Let's do that exposition.
Let's do exposition, and we have some time.
Yep.
And we'll have things. No. maybe at measure 5, I know he says poco piano, but I still think you can be a little bit more present to contrast with that. I like the tone change, but I think you can still have a little bit more.
Sure. Can I hear you guys how the complement changes to a different color from bar 4 to 5?
Sure.
Yeah, bar 4.
Yeah.
Hey guys, let me just do this with you. Still on. Can you hear me? What if you disagree? And this is this is the age-old question. You asked Roger to be a little bit more. Well, what if Roger thinks musically that is the exact opposite?
We try both options, and then we see which one sounds the best.
So is it all democratic, or because he has a tune he gets to decide, or what?
Sometimes, most of the time it is democratic. There are times where if you're sort of the solo voice, we will be like, all right, fine, we'll let you sort of decide.
Okay, thanks.
Sid Buffle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we play it right at bar 5, please?
Yeah. That's interesting. I might do something and step out into the audience just to see how present you are
Sure.
in terms of the balance, because it's a little bit hard to judge from where I am. But you guys play from measure 5 again, but I'm just going to stick out into the audience just to hear how the balance is.
Let's play from measure 1 to 14. Sure.
Sure.
Sure. In position?
Yeah. It's just about so I can hear you through the texture as well.
Okay.
Good.
Good. At measure 20, I know we talked about this is not an ideal register for me to sing through these 16 notes. But right now it feels like we're trying to hide the intensity and excitement from the bass line a little bit, especially with your 8th note. Would you mind playing from 24 to 25 so we get an ideal transition?
Justin?
Yeah, just. Is it possible we have a clear sense of arrival and maybe afterwards not quite so heavy?
Sure. Like that?
Yeah.
How do you like that?
I'm fine with that.
Can we try from measure 19?
Yeah.
Yep. Can we just quickly check with the inner voices our first note at 20, just to
Yeah.
really
For intonation?
for intonation purposes.
Let's do that.
You eat flat,
I
right?
have E flat.
Yeah. So just maybe.
That's,
Can you explain that?
you're better doing that than me.
Yeah.
So intonation is a very controversial topic in string quartets. And in a place like this, when we're practicing just like simple tonic, a dominant, 1 and 5, it's always good to establish kind of the outer structure of a chord, so the root and the fifth, and then you fit in the third of the chord, which is Brian's note in this instance, right in between. So in this case, his note usually has to be a tiny bit lower for it to be justly in tune.
So I have a follow-up on that. Actually, if you don't mind, for Will. So you're in A flat major.
Yeah.
Would you say you would build the chord differently if you were in a minor key, for example?
Yes, yeah. In a minor key, the third is actually going to be generally, this is also kind of controversial depending on who you ask, but generally going to be a little bit higher than in a major key, just due to acoustics and how the overtone series works. Yeah.
Great. Can you show us?
Yeah. Well, we play. Well, we build an A flat major chord.
Yeah.
So you start from the bottom, right? So it starts from the cello.
Yeah. So
A flat major chord.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're same, and then you just double.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll start with the tonic. Playing a little bit sharper.
Yeah.
See how it sounds.
Yep. Yep. Let's build it again. This is a very subtle difference.
Yeah.
But what about we do different voicing? So
Yeah.
Will you still have play the root of the chord, and we go E flat, A flat, and I'll play the top.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
So E flat, A flat as well. Yeah.
I will try to play a C on an equal temperament system, which will sound slightly out of tune and harsh in this context. See, that gives us a very bright and almost unstable color. It kind of just wants to, it has this melodic quality of wanting to go up. But if, in this case, we're sitting on a tonic chord, as a moment of stillness and like openness, we might try to lower the third a little bit so that the harmonic structure of the chord is more stable. Okay. And versus this is what I played before. Versus what I played before.
Adjust it down.
So I have a question on the vibrato part of this. So it sounds like when you tune everything, it's no vibrato, correct?
We try.
Yes.
So maybe you could speak a little bit about rehearsing with versus without, because when you perform, you probably will have vibrato on this.
Yeah.
And if we're trying to just get in very technical practice of tuning, we always do non-vibrato, just because, you know, vibrato kind of takes away the purity of the interval a little bit. And once we get in tune with that non-vibrato sound, and we try to add a little bit of that to give a singing quality, but it's still, we have to pitch our ears very sensitively to each other's pitch, so we don't get like
Really out of tune.
yeah, like just Anthony. Would you mind telling us a story of you playing like the tendency of pitches going extremely sharp in the bridge?
What? Oh, the bridge. So basically the biggest challenge for me is intonation with this. As a violinist, sort of by yourself with a piano, you tend to just tune to the piano because there's no way that that instrument can adjust to the violin. But what that sort of made me do is sort of soloistically play quite sharp. So there was this one case they're referring to the bridge where I played the first violin, and basically I kept creeping up sharper and sharper. It was this masterclass with the Emerson String Quartet's cellist, Paul Watkins, and I was listening back to the tape, and I started off pretty well, but by the end I was about like 10 cents sharp, so it can happen. But my biggest thing is like the difference between melodic intonation versus harmonic, so vertical versus horizontal intonation, which I think, yeah. Shall we keep going?
I see the microphone. I would like to talk about something that's, I think, essential to this.
So we've been talking a lot about very technical things with playing in a string quartet with intonation, using big words like just and equal temperament and all of these sort of things. But something that we also think about is the effect that this music is supposed to have on the audience and how the emotional content. So we were just in A flat major, but this piece, like I said, is in F minor. So we often in rehearsal try to think of how the music makes us feel, the sort of words that we would use to describe the character of the music. So I think it would be interesting to sort of walk you guys through the decisions that we made with our bows and with our vibrato to talk about how we execute certain different characters and emotional moods. So we'll start with the opening. We'll do the first 8 bars, and then we'll jump to where we just were. And it's the 2 keys are, it starts in F minor, and then we're going to go to A flat major. I think first we should just play through it, sort of let you guys listen to the difference. And then we can go and talk through about exactly what we did with our bows and with our vibrato to create these different colors.
So play the first 8 bars,
Yeah.
and then we'll play the 8 bars.
Sure. Great. Now to bar 20. Yeah. Oh, you good. Yeah.
Check, check. So at the very beginning, we can go through and so when we were coming up with how this made us feel and the sort of character of what it is, a lot of words that were coming up were like angst and pain, sort of muggy feeling. Haydn, when he wrote this quartet, was actually he was far away from Vienna, and he was in a place that was very hot and humid. The people that he was staying with were very depressed because they weren't able to be with their families. They were separated from their families, and this was sort of a dark moment in his life. And in this time, it was actually very uncommon to write a piece completely in a minor key. So we were thinking of really how are we going to bring out this really sort of exotic character that he's trying to express. And so we'll show you a few different options, I think, of what we could have done. What we've landed on is something a bit longer in the bow stroke, but I think we should show you what it would sound like if we used a shorter bow stroke with with no vibrato, and then we'll show you a few examples. I won't talk so much. We'll just show you through sound. Let's do the beginning. Let's do no vibrato, really short bow, separate.
Okay, separate.
Yeah. Try to play like it's in major. Can you guys all hear me if I speak like this? Okay, thank you. The microphone is a bit troublesome, I think. So that doesn't really capture, I think, the mood that we're going for with this hot and humid character where he's sort of, depressed. So this just doesn't really capture it. So I think something, which we'll do away now where it's just extremely heavy. Maybe this is too far in the other direction. Extremely heavy, extremely long bow strokes, lots of vibrato. Maybe uncharacteristic of how we would play typical classical music.
Like Brahms.
Yes, really heavy, really heavy. Tell the difference of how, at least through sound, how that's much different. Perhaps too far in the other direction, but it's good to know the full capabilities of sound that we're able to create. So that's a little bit of how we would explore the sound. We've landed somewhere in the middle, probably a little closer to the second option than the first one, but it's important for us to sort of figure out the full scope of sound that is possible through the means that we have available to us. Now we'll jump to the major section, which we really try to contrast. Some words that we've come up with is like it's like the sun comes out. The sun's coming out and it's a glimpse of happiness, a glimpse of hope. And the ways that we've thought about doing this is through contact point. Is everyone in the audience string players? Yes?
Most of us,
Yeah. And do you have a question here?
Actually, I think we're going there, but I just wanted to, I think for all of us, it's really important to understand not only contact point, but sound production in general. So maybe you could take 5 minutes. You have two violins, viola and cello.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the technicalities of bow control and sound production with respect to all four of you playing? Because obviously if you're playing like a solo piece, it would be somewhat different acoustically speaking.
Right. I'll let someone else talk. I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, so obviously one part about being a quartet is that we're no longer just by ourselves or with a pianist. We have to create a group sound and something that is identifiable as us. So a lot of that comes down to just matching articulations and matching vibrato, color, but it's actually not as simple as, say Roger's playing with a very short contact point, a short stroke and a contact point that is maybe higher up on the fingerboard or something. It's actually a lot more has to do with our own instruments. Like for me, as a cellist, I have a lot thicker strings, and that means that I have to play, in a lot of cases, if we're playing all in unison, I have to play a little bit shorter than everyone else for it to sound out there like that it's actually a unified sound. And Roger.
Quick thing. Sometimes it also depends what role we play in the quartet. So if he's going off and doing a very lyrical thing, he's going to have to change his tone color and his sound production versus if we're just doing like a rhythmic thing as we showed you in the beginning where we just have the da 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 da. That's going to be different to da 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 that he's going to be doing. So we always have to adapt and it's never just one single answer.
I think I'll just talk about some basic things about sound production in general. I'm pretty sure all of your teachers had at least at some point told you to play closer to the bridge. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, so basically there's a lot of places on the instrument where we can place our bows from, I don't know.
I can demonstrate with the thing. You
Yeah.
just talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So versus fingerboard
Yeah.
versus very close to the bridge. You're going to get many different.
Without any context, generally, if we play closer to the fingerboard, the sound is more muffled and thin. It doesn't have the high frequencies when we play closer to the bridge. And if we play closer to the bridge, it kind of requires a different bow control. Usually we can't use as much bow as it would be to play like near the fingerboard, so the bow will be relatively slow, but the sound is actually more projecting and centered. So if we want to play a melody, let's say if I
can hold it.
If I play this passage,
where it kind of resembles operatic singing, the soprano quality and sound. We just have to imagine that we have to be this big figure on stage and try to project our voice to the very end of the hall. So we probably want to play closer to the bridge, a little slower bow. But if we, in places such as, what about we jump to 142?
42.
Yeah.
do the pickup.
Pick up. Yeah.
So that's probably that the opposite side of melodic playing. It's a passage when it resembles a choral,
Almost medieval.
almost medieval chanting, this kind of sound world. So we're trying to blend with each other as much as possible. And in this case, we'll want to play a little closer to the fingerboard so we can just melt into one sound. And also it fits the character of the music here. Haydn gave us piano assai, it's very, very soft. So we probably want to play it with a thin voice.
Do you think we could hear the whole thing in context, like this whole area, and then we maybe could go to the ABC?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course.
Great.
Let's go from recap second time part. So,
We're just going to do it.
yeah, 137. Yeah.
That was the end of the Haydn.
That's the end of the Haydn. We're going to jump to something completely different. And you'll see immediately by how it sounds, that it's composed many, many, many years later.
So question, since this is impressionistic music and you just came from the classical period, how do you actually talk about your setup, maybe a little bit about the strings you use and all these things? Because obviously you're not going to change the strings in between pieces. So do you all have to kind of agree to the kind of flexibility that the strings would have for all of your instruments? Or do you kind of work with what each instrument needs?
I think so. It really depends on the instruments. If we have time at the end, we can talk a little bit about each person's instrument, because they're actually kind of special. But each instrument has a whole sort of vocabulary of sound, if that sort of makes sense. So we try our best to blend our instruments into this new sort of impressionistic sound mode. So if you think of not even the music of Ravel and Debussy, who are sort of most commonly associated with that period, but the artwork of Manet, Monet, of all being very watery, being very evocative, a lot of blues, a lot of greens, that sort of effect where you can't really see for certain what, you can kind of get what they're trying to paint, but at the same time, it's all mostly about your feeling associated with that. So water lilies, they're not particularly distinct, but you get this sort of flavor of what the artist is trying to come up with. And that's sort of what we're going to try and do with this piece.
So we were talking about the instruments and how things were different. During the time of Haydn, they played on instruments that are quite different from what we play on now. They used gut strings, so the strings themselves were actually made from sheep gut, and we don't play on sheep gut strings, we play on metal strings, and they have a much higher tension, they last longer, there's more stability in tuning, so there's practical reasons of why we use them. Also in the time of Haydn, this chamber music was usually performed in a small room, much smaller than this, and it was, so they weren't so worried about projection. They didn't have to. And whenever music was getting, especially instrumental music, was getting more widely performed across Europe in bigger halls, there was a real need for projection. So that's why the instruments have changed to have higher tension on the strings, so that there could be larger projection into bigger halls. It creates a little bit of a problem, or not a problem, but something that needs to be discussed whenever we are practicing Haydn, because we really want to create this sound that was sort of historically informed. So we want to try to emulate the sound that we would get on the gut strings, and there's lots of ways that we do that. Will actually has his Baroque bow with him today. Why don't you just hold up the Baroque bow compared to your bow, so you can just see the difference. The main differences in playing is that the Baroque bow really emphasizes the down bow, the difference between up and down, whereas the modern bows really tried to make it to where there was no difference. They had a heavier tip weight and so it was more balanced, so we could create longer lines. When you think of composers like Brahms, it's so important for there to be a long line, a long, smooth line. And in the time of Haydn, they made more sense of the difference. They embraced the difference between up and down bows. Okay, lots of talking. We're gonna play some Debussy for you now. And I hope you enjoy the Debussy. We're gonna talk a little bit more later too.
Let's go up to the Sforzando just before.
The Sforzando before two.
Perfect. Yeah.
So as you can tell, it's very different from Haydn. Very, very different. Anthony brought up a good point about how this music is we can relate it to the Impressionistic period, and it's one of the best ways to be inspired about how to create a really meaningful interpretation of this music is by looking at the artwork, the physical artwork of the time. He mentioned that there's lots of blurred lines, blues and greens, and something that we think about in this is how do we sort of change the sound world very quickly without sort of making there being an extreme sort of noticeable change. Something that's beautiful about the physical artwork is that it implies things. So without there being like a very clearly drawn, let's say, flower, you can interpret that there is a flower by just by what's surrounding it. And in this music, we try to do the same thing. So if there's a moment where it changes from very sort of like a eager sort of attitude, a forward sort of aggressive sort of character, then it blends into a more contemplative and murky sort of sound world. We really tried to find a way to make it happen without really knowing the exact moment that that happens. There's one moment in the very beginning of the piece where we've spent lots of hours trying to figure out how to do that. And yeah, so we'll show you where that is. Measure 13 is what I'm talking about. Measure 13.
Yes, okay.
Beginning into the 16th notes. That's how it changes.
How's 4 measures before?
Sure. Yeah, why don't we go from 4? We'll go for measure 9.
Measure 9? Yep.
Go for measure 9, and then we'll just play. Why don't we just play Roger's theme? So we'll cut off before you come in.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yep.
So we mentioned sorry guys, sorry. We mentioned earlier about how we use our bows. And we talked about contact point, speed, bow pressure. So I'll just be very plain and just tell you exactly what we do so that it might be interesting. So whenever we're playing this opening, we're playing much closer to the bridge. We're using a slower bow and we're using a more expressive vibrato. And when we get to the part where we get to that transition, we move our bows far over the fingerboard. We try to change the contact point, and that creates like a different sound. And we use a faster bow, and Roger shifts his vibrato from something that's maybe a little bit faster and narrower to something that's a little slower and wider. And while these individual things that we change don't necessarily have meaning by themselves, whenever you put them all together, it creates a sound world that is unique to us and unique to each group. Each group will come up with a different way of doing this, and this is the way that we've decided to do it. And yeah, I mean, I think one way that we could possibly show you like how this works is by showing you if we didn't do that, if we didn't change anything, and we just went through and played it exactly the same, and sort of allow you guys to see the effect that has on the music.
Before you do that,
Yes.
so this is to anybody, but Brian, maybe you could speak to this.
Sure.
So obviously in the Haydn, it's relatively conservative markings with respect to crescendo, little small markings. Basically, in Haydn's time, just like in Mozart, really coming out of Baroque, where there were no markings.
Right.
Now here we are in the Impressionist period, and then all the way up to Mahler, where he marks practically every bar with something. So not only is this in French, but how do you guys square all more help, if you will, that you're getting from Debussy versus what you would do in Haydn? How much interpretive leeway would you say you have, because he does write a lot of stuff that Haydn didn't?
That's a great point. In the Haydn, I'm sure you guys have all noticed in some of the music that you guys have played that, markings like piano, forte, mezzo forte, maybe dolce, these sort of terms that are written in the music. Haydn only gives us forte and piano, and it's up to us to really try to create something different and meaningful, and we really have to use a lot of creative sort of interpretation to figure out, okay, are we going to put a crescendo here? It's sort of up to us to sort of create our own markings. Debussy is completely different. Debussy was a man who knew exactly what he wanted, and he put it all in the music. It's not every bar that has a marking, but it's close to it. There's accents all over, there's diminuendos, there's different dynamic markings, there's different, he writes different descriptions of how he wants the sound. So like I said about how we're changing the sound, this wasn't some original idea that we came up with, we're just doing what Debussy told us to do. So, for example, whenever we're changing the sound, I'll just walk through what I have in my part. I have diminuendo, and then piano, and then another diminuendo, and then piano again, and then another diminuendo, and then pianissimo. So that tells me something, that we have to do something. We can't just go through and ignore that. It is a completely different experience playing this music. Anthony, would you like to say something? I can tell.
To help with Haydn, one of our biggest mentors, Joel Krosnick, he also sort of gave us the fact that Haydn actually really knew his musicians because they were basically his court musicians. He would work with them every single day. So the lack of stuff like descriptive words, not as many dynamics, it was because the players really knew him and what he wanted to do. So there was a lot of trust that he didn't need to put as many musical directions. So we sort of need to go back and sort of pretend that we're his musicians and be like, what would he have liked us to sort of play? Obviously, we don't have a time machine, so we can't actually ask him, but we sort of do our best to interpret the music, whereas composers in the late 19th century and early 20th, I know, for example, if anyone's done the Cordon Gold Violin Concerto or the Walton Concerto, they're both really, really OCD about their markings, and so we have to sort of be very particular about what they want because everything is just written on the page, just what sort of Brian was saying about musical directions and tempi, metronome markings, and let's give it a play.
Yeah, so we're gonna play it once as if it was Haydn. He just writes forte at the beginning, and then there's nothing else told. It's our first run through. We're just gonna play it all forte, and we're gonna see, and then we're gonna play it once as if it's Debussy, as we should, and we're gonna do the markings that are on the page. I think this will show you just how much Debussy gives us and how imaginative he was with his markings and sounds.
So,
Yeah, same place 9 to whatever the other measure is, and we'll play it.
forte
just play
and
it.
pianissimo.
We'll just imagine it's just the forte at the beginning,
Yeah.
nothing else.
Okay. Cool.
It's gonna be tough.
9 to
Measure 9, the same thing we just played. We're gonna play it all forte.
everything.
Maybe in a Haydn style though.
Okay.
Let's just play
Now Debussy.
Let's play
Yeah.
Debussy. It's very different. Very different.
I have to actually thank you for doing that, because what I was thinking about, so Prokofiev Classical Symphony is exactly what you did the first time. Is he wrote the symphony as if Haydn were living in the 20th century. How would he do that? And it's amazing how much color you get if you first play it in the style of Haydn,
Right.
where it's very beautiful, but then it's like watching a black and white TV.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's all in color, so thanks for doing
Yeah, definitely. I think it would be interesting. Can I see the microphone? What's happening on the screen?
Yeah, just.
I was gonna jump to a different topic, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the idea about motive and how we change, but not the DNA of the. You know.
Sure, that's good, and then we can jump to.
Yeah.
And we can jump to different
Good.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful idea, Will.
Yeah. So. There we go.
Yeah, okay. So this whole quartet is based on the opening motive, very much how like Beethoven is a very motivic composer. Here, Debussy is basically doing that. And then the opening motive that Roger plays is really transformed throughout the whole piece. But even in just the first movement, when we're working in rehearsal, we talk a lot about how that motive is presented. You know, we don't want the DNA of the motive to change, but we still want kind of.
You just tell what the motive is.
Oh yeah, a motive is a short musical idea.
just get him to play it.
Yeah, Roger can just play. Yeah.
I play more in tempo.
Yeah, and so that motive, that short little fragment, we want it to. We don't want the structure, the inherent DNA of it to change, but we do want how it's presented to feel different. Like how a person could maybe wear a different outfit on one day, but they're not going to be suddenly 5 feet taller or 5 feet shorter, you know. Yeah. So Roger, if you wouldn't mind playing the opening and then jumping to like 2 after or 3 after 1. Yeah.
We could just go through
We could go
the first movement and just play all the different
That's
temperatures
true,
back
yeah.
all together.
Yeah.
This is-
Or
this would be
even
really
your
interesting.
thing, like each movement. I think that actually is better because he changes.
Let's go
the
through the
tone.
first. Let's go through the
Okay.
first movement. Let's go through because it changes a lot. So yeah, we're gonna go through the first movement and show you guys every time that it comes back. It's a little different and quite different sometimes.
Yeah. So,
First word.
yeah, that's cool measures.
One.
One.
What about we tell our audience what's the marking?
No, I think they can figure it out. I think that's actually more special. Next,
Let's jump to 2.
2. Yeah. Double ball.
Next one would be, I think, the recap.
No, 4. 4. Don't skip mine.
Oh, yes.
Don't skip mine.
I'll give the bar for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you don't get this second one.
And then the
And
fi-
then
this
final one.
is the final one.
Which is. Oh, yes.
Ready, Roger? 5.
So awesome and so much detail. So in the time we have left, do you think you could play the first movement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Fabulous playing. Thank you all. I think we have a few minutes, and this is a great opportunity for both the students and the parents to ask them some questions. They're a phenomenal group. I don't know when we can have them back. So this is your big opportunity if you have any questions about anything from these guys. You can just speak up. Sorry, I can't get you the mic, but I can translate in case people can't hear. Yes? You had one? No? Well, why are you thinking about... Yes, go ahead, please.
I was interested in the actual instruments themselves.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sweet. Yep, Mike, go.
So we all play on instruments that have been loaned to us from the Juilliard School, except for Will. Will owns a cello. That's a very fine cello. So I play on a early 20th century viola by the maker Gaetano Scarabotto. It's a really nice instrument. It's 16 5/8 in length. And yeah, I have to get it back in a few weeks, so kind of sad about that, but it's a beautiful instrument. Really, I've enjoyed playing on it.
So I don't have my normal cello with me, but the cello I usually play on is a English cello from the 1780s, approximately, by the maker Benjamin Banks. Yeah, it's currently getting some work done at the violin doctor, so to speak, but I should have it back soon.
I have a really special instrument. So I'm, along with Brian, really sad to have to give this back to Juilliard. It's actually older than this country. It's a 1775 GB Guadagnini. So Gary can tell you a little bit more about that make and how much this violin would cost if I damaged it or anything. So,
as you can see, it's very shiny, but I think he's looking at upwards $2.5 to $3 million. So it's actually a very, very special instrument.
yeah.
And I play on a French instrument made by two famous luthiers, Gann and Bernardel, and this violin is made in 1868.
Wow. But the instruments don't play themselves. As you can see, this is a very polished group. So really bravo to you and for the instruments that you put it all together. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes?
How do you choose what music to play?
Oh, fun.
Great question.
To
Maybe talk about the fish off. There are required pieces you have to play, right?
Yeah. So it really depends. We barely choose music just for fun nowadays anymore. We usually either have an upcoming competition or a music festival that kind of requires us to play certain pieces. So, for example, the fish off competition, we have to play a work from two contrasting periods and also contemporary work. So we will be playing the Haydn we played, and also the full Haydn, also full Debussy quartet, and a contemporary piece by a Chinese composer called a piece called Gobi Gloria.
Is it written for the competition?
No.
So it was written before?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes in competitions, they'll ask a composer to write something that you have to learn right on the spot, which is another challenge. It's very difficult.
Another way we decide if we do have some free time is we just listen to various quartets on Spotify or on YouTube, and then we'll just get together and be like, hey guys, can we just have a reading party? And then we'll just read a bunch of music, and then we'll be like, great, this sounds cool, let's sort of program this maybe in the future, sort of put it in the sort of memory bank for what we can start working on next.
I'm so glad that you're doing that, because it's sort of fallen out of favor, but I can tell all of you do have chamber music reading parties. And it doesn't matter whether it sounds great or it sounds awful. You all learn and you understand what you want to do, and then that gives you more of an idea of what you do want to learn. So
Yeah, and
Anthony listened to a lot of music, and he always just came to rehearsal very excited and to show us this piece he's just
you
heard.
guys don't listen.
And he has a very niche taste in classical music as well. Yeah. Would you want to tell us a little bit
About what?
some niche gems you've discovered in classical music quartet repertoire?
Sure. So the quartet kind of know me as being very, very like British inspired. I'm not British, I'm actually Australian. So we don't have too many composers, so I just lean towards the British. But there are like a few Bach's quartets and random, I mean, we love Morton actually. There's this second Morton quartet. But funnily enough, there was a Juilliard class that I took by, it's called The Old and the New. And we were experimenting we were sort of touching on postmodernism, which is a bit weird. And I don't really have time to kind of explain it. But essentially, this composer called George Rochberg, he originally was very serialist. So think Schoenberg and Weber and Berg, 12-tone music. It's a little bit dissonant. It's not one of my favorites. But what happened was his child died, unfortunately, at a young age, and he found that he couldn't keep composing that way to sort of express his grief. So he wrote one quartet, I think it's its fourth quartet, where it's got this movement, which is just variations on Pachelbel's canon. And it's very neat to see what he actually does on that. He kind of explores it, going from the original canon into almost transforming it into Mahler, and then taking it back into the original canon. And it's a very cool work. That's one of my hidden gems.
great. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes.
Hey, so a lot of the students here are obviously have coaches that work with them. I'm sure you guys have a coach that you work with on a pretty frequent basis. But the other thing that they're used to, obviously, is like, working with an orchestra conductor or with their private teacher or on their own. But I feel like one of the things that they would benefit from is hearing a little bit about, as a quartet or as a duet, how does that work for you folks if you just get in a room and are working together? Who sort of takes the lead? How do you guys figure out how to structure things? I feel like that's an area of like question mark for a lot of younger students. It'd be great to hear a little bit about how you folks structure that time and who sort of takes the lead and how it works on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's a great question. In an orchestra rehearsal, the nice thing about it is you just have to show up, and then the conductor kind of figures everything out. And I mean, that's what's nice. You don't have to think too much about what to do. But for us, we have to, work with our schedules, figure out times that we can rehearse. Our goal is to rehearse anywhere between 15 to 20 hours a week, which on top of practicing, we should be practicing anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a day. Not sure if we do that every time. A good day is 2 hours is good sometimes. But yeah, so we schedule our rehearsals, we will try to do them in chunks at least an hour. If we can't get an hour, we'll usually just won't rehearse. We'll wait and find a different time. But we'll have the repertoire planned that we want to rehearse. We'll have this bit. We'll come into the rehearsal with ideas of what we want to do. It's funny. At one point, we actually sat down and we had a little talk and made quartet laws for us as a quartet. And one of the laws that we came up with was coming to rehearsal with your part practiced. You can play it in tune, and you have ideas. Because the worst thing that can happen is you show up to rehearsal, and then we're all just sitting there. None of us haven't practiced our part, or even if one person hasn't practiced their part, it kind of slows things down. So we try to have ideas, a plan for what we're going to rehearse, and then trying our absolute best to stick to the time that we have and try to get through everything. Anthony's really good at setting timers and sort of making sure that we get through things, because it's really easy for us just to get into a big debate where we'll talk about 4 bars for an hour and a half, and then we have 350 more bars to get through.
It's a work in progress.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for this really informative, beautiful playing and informative talk. I think all of us got a lot out of it. Wish you the very best of luck, not only in the Fish Off, but in all of your future endeavors, and we really look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.